All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another We've Read the Documents live stream. I'm your host, John Brisson. I was able to get hold of some of the Larry MacDonald CNP papers from 1981 up to his death in 1983 from his Larry MacDonald library because he was a important member, long-term member of the United States House of Representatives in Georgia. So he's got his own library. And so I was able to get documents that have never before seen that I know of. I have the 1981 membership list. The founding of the CNP was 1981. I have the 1982 membership list. I have the 1983 membership list. I have the 1981 incorporation papers. I actually have the incorporation papers of the Council for National Policy. It was done in Texas. I have personal correspondence between Larry MacDonald and other members of the CNP. I have meeting itineraries. I have them meeting with heads of state in Taiwan and violating the Hatch Act. And then later, meeting with heads of state in the People's Republic of China and the USSR. Interesting stuff, huh? I'll be going through it. So here we have Lawrence Patton MacDonald. He was an American politician and member of the United States House of Representatives, representing Georgia's 7th Congressional District as a Democrat from 1975 until he was killed while a passenger on board Korean Air Flights 007 when it was shot down by Soviet interceptors. Conservative Democrat, MacDonald was active in numerous civic organizations, maintained one of the most conservative voting records in Congress. He was known for his staunch opposition to communism. He was the second president of the John Birch Society. He founded Western Goals Foundation with Major General John K. Singlaub and John Rees. He became the second president of John Birch Society right before his death after Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, stepped down. And he was a founding member of the Council for National Policy. We know that now. Not yet, creamy goodness. I will once I have everything. So here is an article from Politico, "The Congressman Who Created His Own Deep State, Really?" by Zach Dorfman. You'd be forgiven for thinking that 2018 is a uniquely worrying moment in America's great clamorous experiment with representative government, and you wouldn't be entirely wrong. Loose talk of the deep state seeking to undermine the Trump administration and its allies has entered the political mainstream. Outlandish as this charge may be, we shouldn't be surprised. Conspiratorial thinking has a long grip on American politics and warping effects. This is a story of one such example, now largely forgotten. It's about an arch-conservative Congressman Larry MacDonald. He became a leader of the New Right, founding his own private intelligence agency, and died at the hands of his geopolitical nemesis, all while in office. MacDonald was a militant Cold Warrior and talented zealot who built his own mini deep state, a foundation which worked with government and law enforcement officials to collect and disseminate information about supposed subversives. The tale of Representative Larry MacDonald might be the weirdest, most unbelievable one in American politics that you've never heard. It's entirely without precedent. Private spy rings can be traced back all the way to the 1920s, says Darren Malloy, a professor of history at Wilfrid Laurier University and expert on radical political and social movements, or even back to Alan Pinkerton, which Recluse talked a lot about Pinkerton's detective agency at the end of the 19th century. A tradition picked up during the 1950s, Malloy says, reportedly with the likes of anti-communist groups like the American Security Council, which Recluse has talked about at length, and the John Birch Society. Such groups perpetuated conspiracies by gathering so-called intelligence in an effort to discredit people to try and link them to grand and dastardly schemes. Seth Rosenfield, author of Subversives, the FBI's War on Degenerate Radicals, and Reagan's Rise to Power, told me. So whether it was a communist conspiracy then or a deep state plot now, their attempts to undermine people are descending from the powers of the moment. Well, I mean, let's be real here. The Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group, the left side of the world order, is just as problematic as the Council for National Policy and Los Sarkel are on the right. I mean, of course, this is written by progressives, so there's going to be a progressive slant. It was from the early area that MacDonald emerged, but in Cold War story are many lessons for our own age about the dangerous obsession or a national obsession over danger. In the post-Watergate election of November 1974, the American people elected 75 new Democratic members of Congress. These Watergate babies represent the most liberal group of incoming representatives in the country's history, with one very notable exception. Even by conservative standards, Larry MacDonald, a telegenic rhetorician, I can't pronounce rhetorician. Rhetorician. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. You guys know what I mean. From northern Georgia, was one of the most radical congressmen from either party elected during the later 20th century. While in Congress, MacDonald was famously out of step with his colleagues, says Kevin Cruz, a Princeton historian and scholar of the conservative movement. He emerged as a very far-right voice in the time he was there. By his own telling, in the early years, Larry P. MacDonald, the P stood for Patton after General George S. Patton, a distant relative, was happy with his life as a practicing urologist in exurban Georgia. By the early 1970s, MacDonald had become a well-known local right-to-life activist, not to mention a commanding and persuasive orator with a mellifluous voice, spurred above all by what he said was insufficient anti-communist zeal. He ran for Congress in 1972, winning election on a second try 2 years later. During nearly a decade in Washington, MacDonald espoused extreme views, a philosophy of steep cuts in government spending and foreign aid programs, abolishing the income tax, and doing almost all post-New Deal welfare in the regulatory state. He called Martin Luther King for a complete loosening of gun laws and a deportation of illegal aliens. Gotta enforce the laws. He emphasized America's Christian heritage and decried the welfare state role to totalitarianism and America's retreat from greatness. One of MacDonald's Republican congressional challengers excoriated him publicly as a fascist. The columnist Jack Anderson called him a Bush League McCarthy. As a star rose in the early 1980s, MacDonald, although still a Democrat, became a national force for the New Right, the movement of conservative, Christian, and other ideological Orthodox organizations that pried power away from the Republican political establishment, forging close relations with Jerry Falwell and his moral majority, Senator Jesse Helms, and Richard Viguerie, the godfather of the conservative direct mail campaigns. MacDonald also aligned with the conservative financier Nelson Bunker Hunt, and star Republican strategist Lee Atwater worked on his 1980 campaign. In Congress, MacDonald's closest confidant and voting partner was another doctor with outre views, Ron Paul. So they talk about the CNP, but not mention the CNP again. All this is CNP. But national security was MacDonald's animating issue. Larry was very conservative about security. Kathy MacDonald, the Congress's widow, told me by phone. He felt they weren't focused enough on national defense, on the deterioration of American sovereignty. More specifically, he warned of a communist conspiracy against America that, in his words, permeated virtually every level of society. Internal subversion by secret red sympathizers in MacDonald's thinking was the single greatest threat to America. For MacDonald, the Soviets were endowed with an almost cosmic menace. We're at war, he said. It's an economic war, it's a war of subversion, it's a war of espionage, it's a war of ideas, and it's a war of terrorism, and it's a war of infiltration. Well, why was the CNP going to meet with the USSR in 1983? Please, someone tell me. I really want to know. Because they appear like they're anti-communist, but are they really anti-communist? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just jaded. I don't know. What are you guys saying in the chat? Anything? Okay. I didn't have anybody. Counts for national policy, Philip. I was wondering if they were going to meet with who was a Soviet leader before Gorbachev? Yuri is his first name. I don't remember his last name. I wonder if they were going to meet with him when they were over there to USSR when they were so afraid of communists. The congressman's views were closely in line with those of John Birch Society, whose members believed treasonous American elites were facilitating the communist plot. The Birchers once accused Dwight Eisenhower of being a dedicated, conscious agent of the communist conspiracy. Mainstream conservatives famously exercised Birchers in the 1960s, but MacDonald was a true believer. His first life, Anna, was estimated over the years. He hosted 10,000 people in his living room for Bircher-inspired lectures and documentaries, according to the 1980 profile of MacDonald in the Atlanta Constitution. For his efforts, Birchers nationwide repaid MacDonald with financial support as campaigns. In 1982, while sitting Congressman, MacDonald was named the John Birch Society National Chairman. He zipped around Washington in a black Mercedes-Benz with JBS-1 vanity plates, John Birch Society 1. With the Birch Society, says Kathy MacDonald, Larry went knocking door to door, talking to people. The society was focused on getting information out to the average American. They were painted as wackos, but they're not. They're very good, patriotic Americans. Yeah, there's people in the lower levels of the John Birch Society, obviously. They believe that they're doing what's right for their country. And I'm not going to say I necessarily disagree with some of the values of the John Birch Society or the Council for National Policy as a conservative Christian. However, it's not, their pro-life stance or their anti-communist stance or their pro-First Amendment stance or the pro-Second Amendment stance. It's not any of those, anti-legal immigration. My issue with them is supporting the Iran-Contra affair, Franklin scandal, 9/11, and so on and so forth. The QAnon operation, That's my issue with these groups, is not really what they show on the surface. Now, I know that progressives will have a problem with those things, obviously, and they'll disagree with that. They'll disagree with many of those stances that I mentioned, but me as a conservative Christian, I do not. But it's what they don't talk about. That's the problem. Then there was alternative medicine. In 1976, MacDonald became embroiled in a nasty lawsuit filed by the wife of a former patient who claimed MacDonald had hastened her husband's death. Throughout the 1970s, MacDonald advocated the use of Latrell, an extract derived from apricot and peach pits delivered via injection as a cure for cancer, says Emma Galden. MacDonald discontinued his medical practice upon election to Congress. In 1963, the FDA had said Latrell has no medical value and was potentially poison to users, forbidden its interstate sale. But that did little to deter its boosters, many of them who were affiliated with the Birch Society. MacDonald was ordered to pay thousands of dollars in malpractice suit, yet he faced no consequences when in October 1976, Atlanta Constitution reporter conducted an undercover investigation. And found that one of MacDonald's closest confidants, a fellow Georgia physician, was requesting that patients seeking Latrell treatment made their checks out to Larry MacDonald for Congress campaign. There's also the potential gun running scandal. By 1977, there were multiple reports of MacDonald, who said he personally owned about 200 firearms, as subject of an active grand jury proceedings over potential felony weapons regulation violations. According to the Atlanta Constitution, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms launched an investigation to whether MacDonald in 1974 induced terminally ill Latrell using patients to sign stacks of federal firearm purchase forms in their own names, obscuring the true owner of the guns. MacDonald, Larry was a hunter, recalls Kathy MacDonald, and he did have quite a few firearms, but she recalls the news report on the subject exaggerated. Yeah, okay. They're all in bed with gun running. Yeah, Mar, that's what it is. Emma Galden. Allegedly, MacDonald stockpiled the guns at the very same Latrell administrating doctor's office and doubled as a campaign headquarters. The Constitution reported MacDonald, who told associates his weapon purchases were in anticipation of a possible communist invasion or insurrection in the U.S. Yeah, sure. Also, he got sent him down to the Latin American death squads and the Nicaraguan Contras. Also obtained to sell the guns. Multiple associates said he told them he could obtain untraceable weapons for them. At least one person told the Constitution that he actually purchased such a fraudulently acquired weapon from MacDonald. After all that, however, an investigation appeared to sputter. The charges were never filed. Soon enough, though, it would be clear that alleged medical malpractice, campaign fraud, and gun running were the least of MacDonald's concerns. From 1974 onward, MacDonald was in Congress, but he was not of it. He did not fret over much about legal or legislative minutia, or spend his days backslapping or glad-handing with other legislators for a piece of the pork barrel. He had much grander priorities. America was at war, and post-church committee intelligence reforms had crippled the government's ability to ferret out enemies in its midst. So he founded his own intelligence network. It started as an in-house operation when MacDonald entered Congress. He tried to land a spot on the Internal Security Committee, the successor to the notorious House Committee on Un-American Activities. There was not much appetite in Congress anymore for rooting out subversives, and the committee was in the process of being dissolved. So according to the 1981 Constitution article, MacDonald instead hired former House Committee on Un-American Activities Committee staffers to work in his congressional office and continue the research on domestic threats under his tutelage. One of his hires, Luis Rees, was also a former undercover FBI and police informant who had reported on the activities of leftists up and down the East Coast. According to the same article, MacDonald arranged his staffers to work out of an office adjacent to his main congressional quarters with a separate door, effectively sealing off the employees from prying outsiders. Another of MacDonald's researchers, a former military intelligence officer, bragged to the Constitution about FBI agents and police officers visiting to pick up staffers' latest research into left-wing groups. Oh boy. 1979, MacDonald embarked on his most ambitious project yet, established his own foundation, which he in fact served as a massive intelligence clearinghouse. The organization was called Western Goals, and it set up shop in a 200-year townhouse in Alexandria, Virginia. Full-time staffers tended to a 6,000-volume library and wrote and edited publications and newsletters about domestic subversive terrorism and involving communist menace abroad, which were circulated to supporters. According to copies of the organization's annual reports, Western Goals established 2 mysterious European offices, too, in West Germany and Austria. Now remember, there's a clip of Alex Jones saying that Trump and his father knew about Western Goals and that Trump would have been a Western Goals president. Okay, remember that. Nothing was like Western Goals, Mary Jo Buckland, who worked there in the early 1980s, told me. Nothing. Even as an employee, Buckland says she was unaware of the organization was doing much at the time. A lot of the funding came from Germany, more than what came from the United States, she recalls. A lot of it was kept from us. The Germans all wore a lot of medals and had a lot of money. The Germany people never came to the U.S. They would fly Western Goals accountant to Germany. Something didn't fill out on the up and up. Perhaps coincidentally, MacDonald was an advocate for releasing convicted Nazi war criminal Rudolf Hess from his decades-long imprisonment. MacDonald even suggested during a political debate that Hess be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, according to the report in a local paper. The most critical part of Western Goals' work was his computer database, a gigantic repository of information about alleged communist-aligned individuals. To gather information on subversive activities, have it on one page, says Buckland, whose work was largely on the business side of the foundation. She said there was a staffer at the Western Goals office whose sole job was to enter information into his database all day, every day. The organization was relatively open about his database as his future Western Goals annual reports, which I found at the Hoover Institute's archives at Stanford University. A key Western Goals employee was John Reese, who also counts for national policy member. Louise's husband, according to break-ins, deaths, threats, and FBI, the covert war against the Central American movement, a 1987 book by Boston Globe journalist Ross Gelbspan. John Reese set up the Western Goals computer database and wrote many of his published reports, and probably considered himself a journalist by profession. Going back to the 1960s, Reese has worked as an FBI and police informant. He once undercover as a Roman Catholic priest and an anti-nuclear activist to infiltrate student groups at Western Goals. At Western Goals, he uses connections with law enforcement officials all over the country to solicit information about suspected radicals. Even among the other Western Goals employees, Reese was seen as shady, Buckland told me. Indeed, sorry about that, y'all. According to journalists John Lee Anderson and Scott Anderson, the group had attracted a host of prominent figures to its cause. The number of full-time employees, though, remained small. Fewer of the 10 board members include Roy Cohn, Joseph McCarthy's former right-hand man and Donald Trump's then mentor, Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, who's a CNP member. Cohn was a CNP member. John K. Singlab, CNP member. Founding member of the CIA and retired Army Major General, later implicated in the Iran-Contra affair, and former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff to Marine Corps 4-star generals, 3 serving congressmen, and the far-right oligarch Roger Milken, who would later go to jail. I think Milken went to jail, right? Or is it a different Milken I'm thinking of? Hold on. No, it was a different Milken. I'm thinking of, which Milken am I thinking about? The one that Trump pardoned. That's why I'm glad I looked it up. Michael Milken. Okay, that's it. I got Michael Milken and Roger Milken confused. Sorry about that. So as you can see, Larry MacDonald is not just some guy. All right, I'm going to post this in the chat. You guys can read the rest. Recluse and them have talked at length about Western Goals. I have too. So let's begin with the documents. So here's the folders, the box with all the documents in there. As you can see. Oh no, hold on. Got a problem. For some reason, it didn't show up where it should have the rest of the slides. Technical difficulties, I apologize. Alright, there we go. Got them now. Alright. Alright, so let's see here. Let's begin. Why is it not? Okay, there we go. So your accounts for national policy folder. It's a little better, Corey. So here we have accounts for national policy, One American Place, Suite 1023, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70825. This is a letter from Louis Woody Jenkins, a congressman from Louisiana, CNP founding member. So him, confidential. So remember, all these are marked confidential. Okay, these are secret, confidential. All right. Member, August 5th, 1981. Members, Board of Governors, Council for National Policy, Washington Star negotiations. Nearly 2 weeks ago, Time Incorporated announced it was intending to cease publication of the Washington Star to the 325,000 circulation afternoon daily, which it purchased a little over 2 years ago. Since its acquisition by Time Incorporated, the Star has been losing more than $20 million a year. At Time Incorporated has invested close to $100 million in trying to revitalize the ailing publication. Although the editorial policy of the Star has been somewhat left center, its impending demise greatly troubled many conservative leaders who feared what would happen if the ultra-liberal morning Washington Post were left without competition in the nation's capital. Other conservatives saw the death of the Star as a great opportunity for conservative businessmen to acquire a daily newspaper in Washington for a modest investment and turn it into a financial success and effective conservative alternative to the Post. Some envisioned the conservative Star as a new national paper which could challenge the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times for national influence. Negotiations with Time Incorporated. Some members of the executive committee of the CNP felt that every effort should be made to investigate the financial status of the Star, contact Time Incorporated regarding terms, and help locate potential purchases in the conservative business community. Richard A. Viguerie took a leading role in arranging a meeting with key Time executives in a Time Life building in New York City last Thursday, July 30th. Richard and I traveled to New York in the company of a host of attorneys, auditors, and newspaper consultants to see that Time Incorporated had to offer. We met 3 hours later with James Shipley, chairman of the Washington Star Company, Charles Baer, group vice president of Time Incorporated, Richard McKeonage, chief financial officer for Time Incorporated, and Philip Lochner, legal counsel for Time Incorporated. Wow. Time Incorporated required all of us to sign non-disclosure agreements, which limited access to the potential buyers. We can reveal about the information gained during the meeting. However, I can disclose some. So they're already trying to buy from Time. They're all together. We know this. Important facts without violating the agreement. There are as follows. The Washington Star has 14 union contracts with 11 separate unions. The Star has 1,400 employees, twice as many as Time Inc. Executives say other afternoon dailies with similar circulations. Here I have. The Star could nearly break down even just by switching from its present publication schedule, afternoon on Monday through Saturday and morning on Sunday, to 5-day-a-week afternoon schedule, according to Time Inc. executives. Valuation based on the above facts and a great deal of detailed financial information made available to us, but which can't be revealed because of a non-disclosure agreement. I've become convinced that Washington Star could be made into financial success, provided its union contracts could be renegotiated to permit a reduction in the workforce down to 50% of its current level. My recommendation to potential buyers was as follows. 1. Meet with the union representatives and reach an agreement on new labor contracts. 2. Purchase the Star for about $12 million, $6 million in cash, and assume a $6 million mortgage. 3. Immediately reduce the workforce by 50%. And 4. Publish the Star 5 days a week. In addition, I felt strong consideration which should be given to making a Star morning paper with an afternoon edition. If the Star did these things and held its daily gross at 5/7 of its present level, taking account 5-day-a-week publication schedule, It would immediately be in the black according to my projections. This would become possible because large reductions in newsprints and labor costs. Finding a buyer. Richard and I discussed potential star with each council member who requested further information. We stressed the following points. The Washington Star is already one of the most powerful papers in America because it's read every day by an influential person in Washington, D.C. The Star has the potential under conservative ownership to become the national daily newspaper. The Star would be an anchor for a wire service similar to those owned jointly by the Washington Post and New York Times and for a major feature and editorial syndicate. I knew the Star could be acquired for a very small sum, less than a daily newspaper recently sold in Houma, Louisiana, a city of 30,000 people. It's potential for substantial profits given proper management. The time problem. Some members of the Council for National Policy have great interest in purchasing the Washington Star. However, they're faced with a possible task, how to evaluate in only 7 days a multi-million-dollar property which had been sustaining major losses. Time Incorporated established an inflexible date on this Friday, August 7th, for the termination of the Washington Star. In addition, they made it clear they would not extend that day while negotiations were in progress. Given that time restraint, no one could possibly analyze all the Star legal's entanglements and union contracts, much less eventually negotiate with separate unions. The type of transaction involved is one that could normally take months or weeks to complete. Furthermore, almost everyone looking at the Star saw very little potential in buying the paper after it closed its doors. After August 7th, the Star loses its most valuable assets, 325,000 paid subscribers, a corpse of experienced advertising salesmen, good with build-up over more than 100 years of publication, and the structure, ongoing nature of the plant, staff, and schedule. Yet if the Star does fold, one company will be in an excellent position to start a new afternoon paper in Washington immediately. The Washington Post Company could be putting out a late edition of the Post under a different name. That device should be enough to keep Washington a one newspaper town for a long time to come. What could be learned from this experience? We must be prepared for opportunities before they arise. I strongly recommend that some of the leading members of the council privately explore the availability of establishing a corporation for the express purpose of making radio, television, and newspaper acquisitions. Such a firm could start small and gradually develop the expertise and management personnel necessary to analyze properties such as Washington Star, which become available to manage in one's purchase. Only yesterday, the owners of the Philadelphia Bulletin, with a circulation of 425,000 daily and an annual loss of $10 million a year, announced intention to cease publication August 16th. Of course, because of its location, the paper could never be as influential as the Star, but its ownership of conservatives would nevertheless be highly desirable. I'm in hope that some of our members will decide to take investments in this critical area. I'll be able to do research, make preliminary inquiries, and engage in fact-finding whenever requested by the members of the council. I'd like to express my appreciation to Richard LBRY for the splendid leadership he exercised in investigating the potential of the Star and bringing the facts to the attention of qualified buyers. The kindest regards, I remain yours for liberty, Louis Woody Jenkins, Executive Director of the Council for National Policy. So I have another letter. Thank you. This is Larry MacDonald writing to Louis Woody Jenkins. Thank you very much for the kind letter on September 22nd. I assume I have made the council a matter of the highest priority. The matter of the Overseas Press Service, your copy of which I'm returning with this letter, I think that somewhere down the line I see distinct possibility accordingly. I recommend that communications and media personnel in the council be advised of its contents, so all of us will be in a better position to evaluate and support the need becomes a reality. Sincerely, Larry P. MacDonald. Council for National Policy. To the Honorable Larry MacDonald, member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Dear Larry, we miss you at the annual meeting for the Council for National Policy. Everyone felt it was a great success. Of the 54 members of the Board of Governors, 47 were in attendance. The Washington meeting taught us a lot about members expect from our gatherings. As a result, we believe we put together better events in the future. Immediately after the meeting, the two of us held a debriefing session and came up with some new ideas on how to handle future quarterly meetings. We will be discussing these with you in the next few weeks. Some important materials are enclosed for your records, including the up-to-date mailing list of the members of the Board of Governors. The next meeting of the Board of Governors will be held on Monday, September 14, 1981 in Washington, so we hope you'll be able to attend. One of the greatest things about working with the Council for National Policy is getting to know you on a personal level. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Sincerely, President of the CNP, Dr. Tim LaHaye, Executive Director, Louis Woody Jenkins. Oh boy, leather. Leather-bound portfolio. Council for National Policy, June 1st, 1981. We have the executive, Louis Woody Jenkins, Executive Council for the National Policy. Some numbers, phone numbers. So here we have the Board of Governors list. Okay, we got Bob Billings, Honorable Bob Billings. This is the Secretary of the Department of Education. Mr. Neil B. Blair, Dr. Bill Bright, Campus Crusade for Christ. Holly Coors, Joseph Coors, you know, Coors beer. Mary C. Crowley, Homes, Interiors, and Gifts. Mr. T. Colin Davis, the oil tycoon baron. His wife, Karen Davis. Dick Dingman, Republican Study Committee. Mr. John Terry Dolan, National Conservative Political Action Committee. Mr. Tom Ellis, Dr. Jerry Falwell, Mr. Edward J. Fulner Jr., the president of the Heritage Foundation. Now, this is a list from the founding of the CNP, okay? Mr. Robbie Gowdy, Campus Crusade for Christ. Miss Nellie J. Gray, March for Life. Miss Lottie Beth Hobbs. Reverend Melvin Hodges, Foundation for Black Christian Education. Mr. Herbert Hunt, Hunt Energy Company. Mr. Nelson Bunker Hunt, Hunt Energy Company. Mr. Reed Irvine, Acrosia Media. Mr. J. Terry Jeffers, the Ruff Foundation. Honorable Louis Woody Jenkins, member of the Louisiana House of Representatives. General Albanon W. Knight, retired. Miss Beverly LaHaye, Concerned Women for America. Dr. Tim LaHaye. Mr. Reed Larson, President, National Right to Work Committee. Mr. John Lofton, Conservative Digest. Mr. James Mathers, Mr. Steak Restaurants. Mr. Ed McTeer, the Round Table. Honorable Larry MacDonald. So we know Larry MacDonald was a founder. The United States House of Representatives. Mr. Sam Moore, Thomas Nelson Incorporated. Dr. Gary North. Dr. Alton Oshner Jr. Mr. Bob J. Perry. Mr. Howard Phillips, National Director of the Conservative Caucus. Mr. Patrick J. Quinn. Honorable H.L. Bill Richardson, member of the California State Senate. Honorable Daniel W. Richney, member of the Louisiana State Senate. Dr. Pat Robertson. Mr. James Rob Robeson. Mr. Howard J. Ruff. Reverend R.J. Rushdoony. Mr. William E. Sarcino, Gun Owners of America. Miss Phyllis Schlafly, America's grandmother, the Eagle Forum. Harlan K. Schleicher Jr., Drexel Burnham. W. Cleon Skousen, President of Freeman's Institute. Mr. Baker Armstrong Smith, Center for National Labor Policy. Mr. Scott Stanley Jr., Review of the News, Editor. Miss Kathy Teague, Executive Director of the American Legislation Exchange Council. Mr. Mike Villarino, President of Papagenos. Mr. Richard A. Vigory, The Vigory Company. Mr. James Whelan, Editor of the Sacramento Union. Mr. Paul Ryrick, Committee for the Survival of Free Congress. And Mr. John W. Whitehead. Oh boy, he was a founding member. Didn't know that. Attorney at law. So now we have the Council for National Policy Committee, June 1st, 1981, Boards and Commissions Committee, Holly Coors, Lottie Beth Hobbs, Mike Villarino. Judicial Committee, Reed Larson, H.L. Bill Richardson, Pat Robertson, James Robeson, John Whitehead. Personal Committee, Dick Dingman, Ed Fulner, Paul Wyrick. Television Committee, Tom Ellis, Neil B. Blair, Pat Robertson, Richard Vigueri. So they did form a television committee. All right, everybody, that's it for today's stream. We're going to pick up maybe in the next few days reading the rest of 1981 Part 1. I got this from I got a lot more to discuss. I got this from Keith Allen Dennis, who's been on the farm. He was looking through the Lawrence MacDonald papers in the Lawrence MacDonald Library, and said, "Hey, there's a folder of CNP with 100 documents on there." I was like, Yeah, give me that. Give me that. So it's I don't know. It's pray for my tooth, you guys. It's a little better at times, and it's rough. Sometimes it's rough. It's not really so much the pain, just I'm not sleeping well because of it, and the TMJ and the bruxism, and my jaw's kind of getting stiff, you know? So. But, other than that, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here, man. I got the 1981 list. I have the, I mean, we can briefly look through it, to do some next time. So we have the, financial report of who funded it. We got articles of incorporation of the CNP. It was in Texas. We got that. We got the bylaws, the first bylaws. Gonna read all that. We got some Woody Jenkins commentary. We got a letter from T. Colin Davis. We got the full membership list. The last membership list was just the executive directory. We got a nomination form for R.J. Rushdoony. Oh boy, Jay Dyer used to work directly with and knew R.J. Rushdoony back during the late 1990s. So we got more letters. We got a letter from Ken Starr, Council for National Policy member later. Got some pro-life press releases. Of course, I am, pro-life myself. Some of the stuff I might not read just because it's not really, they didn't, they weren't trusting of Sandra Day O'Connor. Let's see here. Yeah, they didn't trust Sandra Day O'Connor. Just some more. They rented out a low power TV station. Or at least we're considering it. So that was the first page. Mark. Yeah, cream of goodness. I'll ask Mark if he'll do that. But yeah, so this is the very first batch of founding documents by a founder of the CNP, someone who's very high up in the CNP, was an executive committee member of the Council for National Policy. Lawrence MacDonald. So I still want the later CNP lists from like 1985 to 1990 because I'm pretty sure Lawrence E. King will show up. I really want those lists really bad. Really, really, really bad. I'm sorry, A. Baker. Maybe try to get some cold laser therapy on the nerve. Maybe that'll help. Alright, everybody. Take care. God bless.